my growing up, which are different than yours so much. That was a unique time, and my children can't imagine growing up like I did. But well, I don't remember anything much before I went to school. The one thing I do remember was when my mother was pregnant, and she had twins. And the doctor was not one you could pick up the phone and call, because he didn't have a phone, or neither did we. So we had to have a doctor come in his Model T car, and he arrived, and the babies were ready to be born. So they were, and it was a boy and a girl, and they were healthy, but my mom wasn't healthy, and she somehow had received an infection. And the doctor said, there's no point in taking her to the hospital. She won't make it, because we were going to have to go to Denver to the hospital. He said, she'll never make it there. So my dad said, well, I'm taking her because she will make it, and we're going to get her to the hospital. And so he went home, and my dad took her to the hospital. And we were left with twins and my older brother and sister. So she did make it, but she was in the hospital for 16 weeks. And she was there from July 17th of 1931 until Thanksgiving of 1931. And she came home the day before Thanksgiving. So we were fortunate in having a hired man, and he had a wife that was a very grandmotherly type woman, and she was thrilled to death when the twins were born, and my mom was not there. So my dad asked her if she would like to care for the twins, and he would pay her accordingly. Anyway, she became employed by my father, and she was a wonderful caregiver. She was darling. She would read to the three of us who were older than I was 5, and my brother was 8, my sister was like 11, and then the little twins. But she was in her house. She didn't come to our house. She wanted to live in her house all the time. So my mother was in the hospital. So anyway, then my mother finally came home from the hospital, and then it was time for me to go back to school, because I had just started first grade. And I said, no, I'm not going to school. I'm going to stay home and help my mom. And so they said, no, you're going to school. And I said, I will not go to school. I'm going to stay home and help my mom. I don't want to go to school. I loved school when I was in it, but I just thought my place was there. And I stayed home the rest of that year. But then the next fall, I started 2nd grade, because I had learned to read before I went to school, or as soon as I went to school, I was already reading. So I just started in 2nd grade with the same ones I was in 1st grade, because we had a little country school with only 2 or 3 students in each class. Fort Lupton is just north of Denver. Now it's just a short commute. Then it was an hour to an hour and a half, and the cars didn't go very fast. Then we had a Model T, and then he got a Whippet, and that's a car not too many people have heard about. It would look like, it looked better than a Chevy, and it was kind of two-tone. So it was a nice car. We ended up traveling to Kentucky in it, the whole family, because that's where my parents had come from. They came to Colorado because of my mother's health. They were afraid. That's when everybody was getting TB or tuberculosis, and it turned out that she didn't have it, but they were afraid she's going to get tuberculosis. And that was what most people came to Colorado for, because this is a dry, high climate. I mean, warmer climate than Kentucky. So that's why they came here for her health. And it worked because she lived to be 99 years old. So that kind of scares me. There was no antibiotic when she had an infection, and it went throughout her body. And she was in Mercy Hospital for so long, and the nurses loved her because they would spend all their time when they weren't helping other patients in her room, because she was there so long that they felt like she was family to them. And so it was, she almost wanted to take them home with her because they were like family to her. Yeah. He came from a huge family. There were 8 children. I mean, that's back in the days when they had big families. And it used to be a lot of the children didn't live to be adults. They'd get some measles or something and it would kill them. So anyway, but in this small school, we had one teacher, and she also had to go start the furnace in the morning before we came to school, when it was cold, of course. She did everything. So she was the janitor and the teacher. But she also used those of us who were finished quickly with our assignments as helping the other students. So we became teachers very young in that school. If you were a 4th grader, you were a teacher for the 1st grade, pretty much. You would be giving them a test. Yeah. There were spelling tests. Well, by 8th grade, I was getting really tired. I realized I'm not getting an education. I'm giving an education, but I'm not getting one myself. I was just not learning a whole lot. One noon, I just walked home from school. And my mom said, "What are you doing? You never come home. You always have perfect attendance." It seemed to me that perfect attendance was the only important thing in that school, is having perfect attendance. Not so much, and getting perfect spelling tests. I always got perfect spelling tests, but otherwise I didn't know if I was learning anything or not. So I just walked home and I told my mom, "I'm so tired of school. All I do is help the little ones, and I like the little ones, but I know I'm not learning what I should be learning." And then I went to high school, and then it was in a little town that wasn't very big, but at least it was more than 24 people or whatever we had in my school. And I loved my teacher, but you get tired of anybody after 8 years and the same old. But anyway, it was great to go to high school finally and have new friends and a change. And we went to Kentucky pretty often because my dad loved to see his family, and my mom too, because they both came from big families. And one family was Democrat, the other was Republican. So they were real competitive, and they always begged us to come stay with them, both of them, so we had to pick and choose which one we'd go stay with. So we had to stay the same period of time with one as the other. It was fun because they were, what can I say, they lived a little easier life than we did. We lived 7 miles from town. By the time I was 14, I could drive to town. And, you had to have a license at 16, but so anyway, we all got to drive when we were young, and because my dad couldn't be there, he worked, but then one time we got a message telegram that my grandmother had passed away, so my dad knew they had to go soon because the funeral would be, that's when the funeral had to be, in a day or 2 or 3 or 4. And so they were going to drive, my dad and my older brother and sister were going to go. And so we were going to stay at home, Mom and I and the twins. And so they took off for Kentucky. And it was Christmas time, so that made it kind of tough on us. They were having a wonderful time in Kentucky with all their brothers and sisters. But my boyfriend, his father was the manager of the sugar factory. So they had a big house, and I thought, oh, that would be fun to go to their house for Christmas. And then he said he wanted to go to a movie afterward in Denver. So I thought, boy, that's a long day. But at that age, I was thinking that sounded pretty good. But we went, and it was not like Christmas at their house, because they didn't do things the way we did them. Mm-hmm. The first place, I wanted to go help her in the kitchen, because that's what I always did with my mom, and she wouldn't allow me in the kitchen at all. They asked me all kinds of questions about our cattle, and I was so tired of that, because I didn't know all those. I said, I don't know how many cattle we have. I don't know how many acres we own. And, I felt like I was really I didn't understand why they were even interested in that. So after dinner, right away, my boyfriend said, okay, let's go to the movie. And so I said, okay. And we got in the car, and I said, I can't go to Denver. I want to go home. So he took me home, and I said, it seems like Christmas. So that was good that I could go home and have Christmas after all. What made it Christmas? Mainly the food. We didn't give a lot of gifts. If we got one nice gift, that was it. We didn't get much. In our stocking, we'd get an orange and some nuts and maybe an apple and, some candy. It was a depression. Remember, that was when my mom was in the hospital. That was when the depression hit, and nobody had money. There was nobody much. There was the crash. So anyway, we didn't think about it, because we didn't know that wasn't, and that was the case with a lot of people. At least we always had food. We never had to worry about that. But then we had sandstorms, and they were horrible. And so that was, the wind would start blowing, and we lived in what you call the sand hills. The sand would blow, and it would hit your legs. It was just like pins sticking in your. So walking home from school when the wind was blowing was horrible, because it would last for 3 or 4 days at a time. You were breathing all this sand. And we left one time and left the window ajar, came home, and it was all over every place. Yeah, it was awful. So, and it's worse in Kansas and Oklahoma maybe than here. I was in high school, but that's the year the war started, 1941. Hawaii was bombed by the Japanese, and so my brother was about to go to war. He went to war. In fact, he went on, and he was D-Day. He went over on D-Day on the barge, but so we all felt very patriotic, and I said no, I wasn't going to go to college, although nobody was insisting that I had to go to college. So I decided I wanted to work for a defense planner, something for the war effort. And, I thought, you all think you can make a difference when you're just 18 years old. But I went to Denver and applied, and my dad had me drive the car by myself to clear through Denver out to this Remington Arms plant where they made guns and ammunition and all this. But I wore a hat and gloves, and I walked in there, and I was applying for a job in the factory. And they said, no, I don't think so. They just looked at me with hat and gloves, and they didn't think I would work out very well in the factory. But they said, we have an office job. So I was hired to work in the office, and then before long, I hadn't worked there very long, the government, they suddenly decided to close the plant, move it to Pasco, Washington, And they were going to move all their employees. If we wanted to go, they would pay part of your way to move there. I said, I don't want to move to Pasco, Washington, my heavenly days. I'm a small town girl. I'm not going to leave with all these people I don't know. And somehow they found me a job, another job, doing at the Stapleton Airport, painting propellers on B-17s. And that was a lot of fun because that was part of it was outside. I also painted little tiny things on their all the instruments, and my hands were always black because I couldn't, around my nails, I could never get all that paint off. So I looked pretty bad with these hands that were always yucky. But I loved doing that because we'd have to climb big old huge ladders to climb up and paint the propellers, with spray guns. And yeah, I thought that was fun. But then I had appendicitis attack. So I had to go to the hospital and have surgery, have my appendix removed. And I remember people coming to see me in the hospital, and they'd say, what's wrong with your hands? Even there, you couldn't. So I said, no, it's just from painting B-17s. But, they were all kind of impressed with B-17s because they were the big bombers that were flying all over. So no, I chose not to return. So I went home to recuperate and decided, you know what? I had friends that were going to Boulder, and I thought, I want to go to college. And, this business of working at places without an education doesn't work very well. So I went to Boulder, and it was during the war, of course, so it was different there. 4,500 when I started at Boulder, 4,500 students. And so that was fun because I loved it. I met one of the guys that was on the football team. He was a first stringer, and so I was dating him, so that made it really special. And then I went through Rush, and of course, they all knew that I was dating the football guy. So anyway, I pledged a sorority, and that was fun. I enjoyed that. And then one day, the war was over, and all the vets were coming back, and this guy walks into it was the first day of the semester, and he walks into our classroom, and he had a leather jacket on, and I thought, But he sat in the back of the room, and I didn't think about him till the next day. I walked in. He was sitting right beside where I'd sat the day before. This is pretty cool. So afterward, he asked me to go for a Coke, and we we talked for hours, and because, I don't know, he wanted to know my life history, and I wanted to know his, and the first thing he told me, he was Welsh. I thought, what's that? Welsh. His family came from Wales, and he's full-blooded Welsh. And I thought, I've never heard of anybody's full-blooded anything. I thought we were all a mixture of things, and hit it off. And so the next thing I knew, he went through Rush too, and he was pledged SAE. So first thing I knew, he wanted me to wear his pin. And then he said, I'm the gal that wears my pins, the gal I'm going to marry. So I thought, oh, okay, that sounds pretty good, because I was nutty about him. And so anyway, we set a date, and we were engaged for a year, and then we got married, and So we moved to Denver because he wanted to finish up at DU. He was a basketball player, and he played basketball, and we had our first child up there. 67 years, I guess, would have been our last anniversary when he was alive. So now it's been 7 more years, so it's 74 years, I guess, now. We have 3 boys and a girl. So after we moved here, my husband was the basketball coach at Colorado Springs High School, which is now Palmer. And so I went back when UCCS wasn't UCCS, it was just University of Colorado, which was just a branch of Boulder, and it was downtown. And so I went back and got my degree, but I've finished up there because they were asking me now, how do we tell people how to get up to the campus? Of course, they didn't have much of a campus. It was just 2 medical buildings that were used for people with tuberculosis. And Dr. Dwyer was a dentist, and he owned all that land, and he donated. My oldest brother went over on D-Day, and he made it, and he was also in the Battle of the Bulge and all of that. He came home. He was he wanted to go out and drink a lot when he came home. He wrecked Dad's brand new car when he was drinking, so that was that was hush-hush. Nobody talked about it. It's a wonder he didn't kill himself. We were just all glad that he didn't get hurt, and probably because he was drunk that he didn't get hurt. But then he was fine after a few weeks. But his 2 best friends in high school both did not come home, and that was so hard, for him, because he didn't have, his best buddies were gone, and that was hard for me because I loved those guys. That they were together all the time. And it hurt. Then my second brother was one of the twins that was born when my mother almost died, and should have died if he hadn't gotten her to the hospital when he did. He was in the Navy in the Korean War. And then my youngest brother, who came along after the twins, which was kind of a surprise, and he was always the highlight of my parents' life. He was a great guy, but he was in Vietnam, and he flew. He went through ROTC, so he trained with cadets at the academy, because that was just when the academy came here. And he went down Texas. So he was in a pilot for years, but he flew in and out of Vietnam, and he made it home too. So my mother went through a tough time with each of them. I think the toughest was with my oldest brother, because they knew what he was going through. They knew he was at the Battle of the Bulge. I don't know how we knew, because there was no communication like there is now. But anyway, they all made it home. And the others didn't have any effects of the war like he did. But I think it was because his 2 best friends didn't make it. One of them was a pilot, and he ended up in the canal or something, between England and Europe. The Channel, I guess they call it, English Channel. And he died in the plane. And the other one was in the Navy, and he didn't make it. So, there are an awful lot of people in our town that lost family. So, it was a good life, and yet it was hard life. I mean, compared to when, but we didn't know any better. We were happy. My growing up, which are different than yours so much, that was a unique time, and my children can't imagine growing up like I did. But I don't remember